I'd like to focus on a program that was sponsored by the Addison School District 4 in the 1980s. It was called the Addison Egyptian Student Exchange Program. The program was the idea of Dr. John Check, who was principal of Oak Elementary School. Following the Middle East peace accords, he wrote a letter to then-President Anwar Sadat of Egypt, expressing his desire that Americans and Egyptians get to know one another better. This eventually resulted in a formal invitation for Czech students to visit Egypt. Following a news segment on their planned trip in November 1981, the Israeli government also issued the students an invitation. This trip was abruptly canceled, however, due to the tragic assassination of Sadat that October. The 10-day trip was rescheduled for March 1982. The group was made up of 24 students from the 5th to 8th grades and 5 adult chaperones. One of the chaperones was a doctor. They first traveled to Rome, where U.S. lawmakers had arranged for them to attend a general audience with Pope John Paul II. Then it was off to Egypt. The children stayed in private homes so that they could experience the local culture firsthand, while the chaperones stayed in a local hotel. The group visited such sites as the Sphinx and Pyramids of Giza near Cairo, the city of Alexandria, and the Suez Canal. After a week in Egypt, the group also traveled to Israel. There they toured various biblical sites, area schools, and met with local dignitaries. In September of 1982, 26 Egyptian students and 5 chaperones spent 18 days in Addison. Like their Addison counterparts, the students lived with host families. The groups toured local companies, schools, and hospitals, lunched at Louis' restaurant, attended the Community Days Festival and Parade, visited Springfield, Illinois, and were feted at many receptions. The children were amazed at the friendliness of Americans and the amount of consumer goods available here. In October 1983, more than 20 students visited Egypt. This trip, according to Check, was completely different as relationships between the two groups had formed. The students were able to do a lot more sightseeing and had a behind-the-scenes tour of the Cairo Museum, visited King Tut's tomb near Luxor, and were hosted at the home of Mrs. Anwar Sadat. 27 Egyptian students and 9 chaperones came to Addison for a 3-week stay in September 1984. The students again stayed in local homes. The group toured Chicago sites and museums, got the opportunity to partake in American activities such as roller and ice skating, could shop, attend classes, and toured Addison schools, and were the guests at various receptions. The Village of Addison was given 2 gifts by the Egyptian delegation: a plate made up of multiple metals and a painting on papyrus. Addison students did not return to Egypt until October 1985, when 26 5th to 8th graders and 10 chaperones made the trip. This trip was almost canceled due to the hijacking of the Achille Lauro cruise liner just 4 days before their departure. The students again stayed with host families. As a group, the students toured the ancient landmarks, visited Egyptian cities, and attended special events. The highlight of the trip was a 4-day cruise along the Nile River. In June 1986, a contingent from Egypt returned to Addison for a 2-week stay. Village President Anthony Rosado described the interaction between the youth. Quote, "There was a special electricity in the air that we all could feel. The young people of our countries have exhibited a true feeling of friendship," unquote. During their visit, the Egyptians presented their Addison hosts with a gold-plated token of their esteem, honoring the Addison Egyptian Student Exchange Program. Additional exchanges were announced for 1987 and 1990, but they did not happen. According to Dave Williams, a former member of the Exchange Program Board, a lack of participant interest and growing security concerns in the Middle East ended the program. You can learn more about the history of Addison by visiting the Addison Historical Museum. The museum is open Wednesday and Fridays from noon to 4 p.m. Admission is free.